All right, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for we'll get started here. All right, welcome everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Steve Kissel. I'm a almost 23-year resident of the area about 5 miles northwest of Sunsites, and I have my own private well. I share with my family Marks here, and I've lived in the desert for about 60 years now. Certainly learned a good appreciation of what water means in the desert, how important it is. So this is an issue that we've become, a number of us, including myself, have become quite passionate about, and we want to share with you some of our concerns tonight about what's happening. Let me introduce, while we're at it, the group that's sponsoring this. We call ourselves the Cochise Groundwater Stewards, and we are a local grassroots community group that is dedicated to creating a sustainable water policy for eastern Cochise County, really all of Cochise County ultimately, but our main focus now is this part of Cochise County, the Sulphur Springs Valley. We also have some members in the San Simon Portal area who are interested in doing some work out there as well. We're working to create a strong network of well-informed neighbors that are committed to the stewardship of our precious groundwater. And these forums are part of that to help to raise the knowledge level of everybody here, get everyone more well-informed, and help everyone to understand the kinds of things, how they can get involved, and the kinds of things they can do to help make improve the situation and to preserve our groundwater for future generations. We believe firmly that sustainable water policies and practices are good business for everyone, whether you're a retiree here, whether you have your own business, or whether you're in agriculture, farming, and they're critical to long-term viability of our communities. What kind of community can we possibly have if we don't have water? It's critical. So besides air, it's the second most critical element to sustain it. And we're very inclusive, very welcoming group that wants to invite, we invite all community members to help us in this endeavor in whichever way you can help. All right, so let's just do a quick little poll. This meeting right now is in the Elfrida sits in the Douglas Basin. So I'll start with the Douglas Basin and see who's here from the Douglas Basin. Just describing where the Douglas Basin. There's 2 groundwater basins in this valley. The southern end is called the Douglas Basin. The northern end is called the Wilcox Basin. And it's roughly divided in the middle where Highway 181 cuts off of Highway 191 and goes all the way across from the Chiricahuas to the Dragon Mountains. And so everything north of the border up to that dividing line, everything from the Chiricahuas a little bit further south, I think it's the Peloncillo Mountains, and then on the other side, the Mule Mountains, as well as the Dragon Mountains for the Douglas Basin. So how many folks live in that area that are here tonight? That's a third, maybe almost half. And then who's here from the Wilcox Basin, north of the 181 divide line, all the way up to the Mount Grants, Chiricahuas to Dragons. Maybe about half. Anyone else outside of that area here tonight? Parts of Bisbee are in the Douglas Basin, but if you're in the old part, you're in the Douglas. If you're outside, maybe like San Jose or other side, there you're in San Pedro Valley. Yeah. Good. All right. Let's just get a feel for where folks are getting their water from. So how many of you are getting your water from a public utility or a private utility? So like Clear Springs and Sunsites or Elfrida Water District right here. Anyone? You guys getting Elfrida Water District? Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Okay. It's good you have the Elfrida Water District to go back to. That's a traffic situation. Gary, you guys are in Clear Springs utility area? Yep. Okay. Anybody here use a private well? You own a private well or you share with a couple neighbors? You had one, used it? Okay, it looks like about 2/3. Anybody hauling water here? You are hauling water too? You work? You've done all the above? All right. Yeah. And it sounds like you were doing that because your well went dry.
Yeah.
Anyone else hauling water? Oh, yeah, that's you were, yeah, your well went dry too, right? That's why you're hauling. Anybody here living solely on rainwater harvesting? Get all your water from the rainwater. There are a few people down here, some in parts of Douglas Basin that do that. It's quite an endeavor, but it certainly can be done. And certainly, but I will say, how many people use rainwater harvesting for other means? I mean, besides just solely depending on it. I'm assuming a lot of you do that as well. Anybody here involved in the agricultural industry or work here? No?
Alan's racing down from Bonita, but he ain't gonna make it.
Oh, Bonita, yeah, that's right. Well, the reason we ask this question is because, as you're gonna hear, when we do this presentation tonight, we really can't solve this problem without the cooperation and input from the agricultural community. So keep that in mind as we go through the presentation tonight. All right, with that, I'm gonna introduce he'll introduce himself, my neighbor Mark, who's gonna give us a presentation on our current challenge here. Douglas and Wilcox Basin.
Right. A lot of water.
What if that was your last drink of water from your well? Yeah. I learned something today. It's called the rule of threes. The rule of threes is without oxygen for 3 minutes, you're in trouble. Without water for 3 days, you're in trouble. Without food for 3 weeks. So what we're going to talk about tonight is obviously important to all of us. And I said this at the beginning of the last time, some of you are going to get tired of this, I hope not, but whether we agree with the solutions or not, or even defining the problem, everybody in this room is in this together. Because the only source of water in this valley is underneath your feet. We all need that water. And unfortunately, this is a picture of what that water is doing. We're not here to tell you what to do or what to think. Steve and I and the group are here to educate, to share with you what we've discovered. Steve and my well went dry 8 years ago. We were fortunate enough to be able to deepen it to the tune of what, $14,000. Most people, I mean, a lot of people wouldn't have that. We were fortunate enough, I don't know if we can deepen it again though, because we ran into a problem when we got to 600 feet. So we may not be able to deepen again. And, but that kind of woke us up to what was going on here. And we started to learn. And all the data I'm going to present tonight comes from the Department of Water Resources, Arizona Department of Water Resources. This is a department under the executive branch of scientists, hydrologists. They're not politicians. They're scientists, and they have no reason to fudge these numbers. These are real numbers. This is just simply a chart of a well in the Sunsites community, southwest of the playa. And you can see, I don't know, this might actually work tonight, Steve.
Oh, yeah,
There's one with the laser. Yeah. Anyway, you can see, this is the depth to water. I'm not going to take time to explain in other charts you're going to see head, but you can see it's going one direction. And this is what we're going to try to learn about tonight and consider some options on how we can stave off this trend here. We now, I don't know if any of you know it, but we won an award. Did you know we won an award? We are now the fastest sinking valley in the entire state. That's right. According to, again, Arizona Department of Water Resources, Wilcox Groundwater Basin has the highest subsidence rate in Arizona due to groundwater pumping, far exceeding the natural mountain front recharge. It's estimated that the current groundwater production, that means pumping, it's a nice way to say pumping, exceeds recharge by a factor of 3 to 8 times in the Wilcox Basin. That means we're pumping 3 to 8 times more out of the ground than what enters through natural sources. Contrary to some popular belief, we do not have an underground river. We have no other source of water flowing into either the Douglas Basin or the Wilcox Basin. It is a confined aquifer. The only water that enters it is the water that falls from the sky within the mountain range of our valley, okay? We're a closed aquifer, which makes this all the more important if we face the facts. I want to say this, Sonny is not here today, but we're not the only people sounding the alarm. ADWR is not. This is a farmer who you can read yourself while I talk. This fellow here, John Hart, was the former Farm Bureau president. He's got quite a different message than what we heard last week from the current president. But he's concerned. He says, you know, the guys with the deepest pockets are going to drill the deepest wells and can afford to pump them. It's survival of the fittest. And that's what we have. If you're not living in an AMA in Arizona, Arizona does have groundwater law. It's called AMAs and INAs. There's 5 AMAs in the state at present, and I think what? 2 INAs. But if you live outside of an AMA, there is no groundwater law. Okay, well actually there is, but we'll get to that. Why does it matter to me? Well, when your well goes dry, sir, what's your name? Byron?
Yeah.
Did it matter to you when your well was dry?
You bet.
Yeah. Have you ever hauled water before?
Yeah.
You have. It sucks.
I do it every day.
Yeah, that's what you find out. You can't grow a garden. You can have no decorative plants. You end up having to take baths and showers with your kids. I was there. I did it in 1987, and it's not fun. Well's going dry. How's your well doing? We have one. At our last meeting, we had, what, 4, 5, 6 people. Our wells have gone dry. Vance's well's gone dry. If you haven't measured your well, there's a guy named Bruce Aiken that will come out and do it. He's got an ultrasound. He doesn't even have to drop a cable down. He'll tell you your depth to water if you're wondering. You should check it. Our water in the Wilcox Basin, it's not this severe in the Douglas Basin yet, but when all these nut trees that are being planted go from a couple acre feet a year to 6 acre feet a year, which is where they're going, you're going to see the same drought, in my opinion, as we're seeing in Wilcox. Earth fissures. Anybody seen an earth fissure? It's a big crack. And earth fissures have closed Highway 191. Actually, this turns out it's been 3 times in 5 years. I got twice in 5 years. And Dragoon Road. And I'm going to show you a picture. Subsidence, that's, again, we win the state award. Our valley is sinking 2 inches a year. Most of this data comes from this ADWR 2018 study. And again, estimates are that we're pumping between 3 and 8 times the recharge. Steve, do we know in the Douglas INA?
It's probably closer to 2 to 4. The problem with the Douglas Basin is considerably smaller basin, so any over pumping is potentially has a larger effect. But right now, the largest area of drop in water level is in the Elfrida area right here, about somewhere around the 5 foot per year range, which is equivalent to what we're seeing in a lot of the Wilcox Basin. You go down closer to Douglas, it's closer to 3 feet over towards like Frontier Road, and that maybe 1 to 2 feet a year. So, but
similar trend,
but smaller numbers in terms of the size of the basin, the amount of water. So less water, it takes less water to drop it deeper quickly.
Yep.
That's a pumping, I should say.
Everybody says, well, but Mark, we're in a drought. Every time I talk to one of our politicians, Mark, we're in a drought. If the drought would go away, this would all go away. Well, the problem with that is that, yes, we are in a severe drought. Since 1997 or 8, we're in our 24th year now. But what does drought mean? Well, it actually means that the rainfall has dropped about 15%. That's it. So, if our drought ended tomorrow, we'd gain 15% rainfall, but we're pumping 300, 800% more than the rainfall. The drought, yes, it contributes, especially to shallow perched water. I'll remember years ago when I first started coming down here, when you got off at I-10 at Dragoon Road, the Amarin and all that, and there was the most beautiful cottonwood trees there. Those are all probably dead, more because of the drought than anything, because that was a shallow perched water. And we've lost a lot of natural vegetation like that around the valley because of the drought. But the drought ending tomorrow will not solve our excessive pumping problems. Sorry to my legislators. Rainfall would have to increase by 500% to over 1,000% to match. Yeah, we'd be living in the Amazon, okay, for that to happen. Nope. Well, the other thing I hear my politicians say, and the farmers, our county supervisor even said, well, but Mark, we pumped more water in the 70s. By golly, we did. We actually did. There's the 70s right there. We were pumping about 400,000 acre feet a year in the 70s. All that area over there, Kansas Settlement. You know why it's called Kansas Settlement? Because it looked like Kansas. It was full of corn in the 70s. It looked like you were driving through Kansas with all the cornfields and wheat fields everywhere, both sides of the road. Well, the oil embargo and energy prices took care of that. And you can see that pretty much everybody went belly up. And but if they hadn't, okay, so we pumped more in the 70s. If we'd have continued on that, that's where we'd be today. Your wells would have been dry 10 years ago instead of now. So to use a bad example of the 70s to justify what's happening today, this is the trend according to ADWR here. And this is 2014 data, so it's actually worse than this, okay? We've had a 82% increase in pumping since 1998, 82% increase in groundwater pumping. This report is based on 2014 data. Heck, I don't think even the dairy was getting going yet in 2014. So this black line right here is probably more like this. I'm not a hydrologist. You can take that for what it's worth, but I think it's common sense. You've increased pumping since this report was issued, okay? This is the Wilcox Basin, by the way. This is not the Douglas Basin. We don't have a lot of data on the Douglas Basin, but it's a similar trend, not quite as extensive. Oh, well, you know what? My friends say, dig a deeper well, Mark. You know, we'll put in a water company and we'll give you a viable solution. It helps people, but it doesn't solve this. Even if you deepen your well, if the pumping continues, we have subsidence and earth fissures all over the valley. This is a really nice one here for this reason. It shows the earth fissure, but it also shows subsidence. You can see this ground here is actually 18 inches delta. This is right at the corner of Cochise Stronghold Road, Dragoon Road, off in that field there. You can walk out there. You see that and you say, wow, this makes sense. Anyway, 18-inch drop there. Since 1969, our valley's dropped 9 feet. That sign up there on the pole is where the ground level was in 1969. This is where it is today. By the way, this is irreversible. When the groundwater, when the aquifer compacts and compresses, contrary to Monty Python, anybody see Quest of the Holy Grail? And what else floats? Very small rocks. No. You'd have to see the movie to understand. Very small rocks do not float. So once the aquifer is compacted, it will never hold the same amount of water again. It loses capacity. So this is lost capacity to our aquifer. We can't fix that. You'll see this around, if you look around town, and matter of fact, if you go to Gold Miners RV Resort, you'll see this, not as dramatic as this picture here, but this is a well. That's a well casing, and that represents a straw, and it doesn't compact. It goes down into the aquifer, and it's planted there, it doesn't move. That is the seal, that concrete there. Department of Environmental Quality requires you to put the seal around the surface so that contaminants can't flow down the annular around the stem into the groundwater. But when the earth subsides and compacts around it, you end up with this. That looks like it's up in the air. It's not. The ground has shrunk away from it. It's sank. That's subsidence. Again, you can't reverse this. Cost. Biggest cost to us on the current trajectory is loss of access to affordable water. You know, unfortunately, there's a lot of folks who talk about, well, how cheap is too deep? I've heard some folks say, you've got 1,000 years of water down there. 1,000 years of water. I say, no, I got enough water where I can afford to get to it. That's it. And for most people, it's not going to be 1,000 feet. The farmer that was here last week told us that if it gets to 1,000 feet, nobody's going to be pumping it. Farmers won't be able to pump it. Residences surely won't be able to pump it. A few water companies might be able to pump it. You know, from 1,000 feet, it takes over 400 psi to get that water from down there out of the wells. 400 psi. That's That's a lot of pressure, that's a big motor, costs a lot to run. Increased loss, and this one kills me, because quite frankly, I like farming. I got, next to me, the Mennonites have this beautiful field with all these grass-fed cows, and I go out there and look and I go, what a beautiful sight. But he probably won't be here much longer. We're already seeing a lot of family farms folding, selling out to the bigger interests, because quite frankly, I think they see the writing on the wall. They know they can't compete against them for the limited groundwater. Really sad, that's a cost to our valley. Diversification, different farming methods, different crops. My neighbor's growing rosemary and cactus now because he sees what's coming down the road. He grows chili peppers too, but they all use less water than corn and wheat. So he's trying to do what he can. If we lose farmers like that, we lose that opportunity to farm in a more sustainable way. Property values, wow. I was talking to one of our legislators on Sunday, and she said, well, Mark, you can haul water. I said, yes, I can. Pretty inconvenient though. Have you ever done that? Yes, I have. Okay, well, you know what? You're a real estate agent. You know better than anybody else. When your land has no water, your land is worthless in Arizona. Without water, go look at land in Arizona without any water. It's, $100, $200, $500 an acre. So, when you lose your water, you lose your property value. Can you deepen your well? If you can, you're good, but that's gonna cost you tens of thousands of dollars. So that's one cost. Earth fissures. What happens when an earth fissure comes down your driveway? Or within a half mile of your home? You have to report that, you have to disclose that when you sell your house. You can't stop an earth fissure. Now what? Oh yeah, I like your house, I'd like to buy it, but what about that crack down the road? What is that? You see the problem. So it's not just about the depth of the water, it's also about the surface degradation and its effect on all of us, property values, okay? Dry wells, of course, dry wells and worthless wells, okay? Creates cautious buyers. People are hearing about this. People are coming down here. A lot of people are coming down here in miniature homes and stuff. They're not making investments in the land anymore because they see this and they go, There's at the end of my street, mine and Steve's street, a farmer from California bought 160 acres last year, 2 years ago. He's got 80 of it planted in pistachios now. And of course, we're having fits, but what can you do, right? Private property rights. Well, he hasn't planted the other half of the 160 acres, and we're asking why. And it turns out that he says, you guys got water problems over there. Really? So he's not sure he's gonna invest and plant the other 80 acres because of the concerns over our water. So creates cautiousness in the market, which affects all of our property values and farm values. Okay, let's talk about options. You all heard of the water district, and the water district is supported by the ag community out here. You all know about this, I'm preaching to the choir, but it was an idea the ag community had, which I think is a fair idea, to help those that are out of water now. The idea is to build a domestic water district where there would be a few deep wells, and grants and loans and taxes would pay to build a network to people who chose to be in this water district. Of course, a water district is a taxing district, just like a fire district or a school district. So once you're in it, you will be taxed for the maintenance and upkeep of that district. But I gotta say, it does help. It would help you right now. Go ahead, you have a question?
One thing, that I dealt with the water district and the fire district is, even if you're not in that area connected to Elfrida, if they make that water district and it runs from, say, Rucker Canyon Road to Dragoon, they can't come and put your fire out, but they can tax you. See, you're not any part of them except you're in their district. Therefore, whoever is hooked to that well can come in and say, oh, well, let's increase our taxes by 15%. Okay?
It is a taxing authority.
Now it hits everybody.
Yeah, it's a taxing authority. Now, to clarify a little bit though, there's two ways of forming a water district. One way is called a contiguous, and then there's the incontiguous. And they changed their minds, and they're gonna go with the incontiguous, which means, with the contiguous, they annex an area. And as long as 51% of the people in that area say yes, and you're in the area, you're gonna pay the tax whether you voted for it or not, okay? They changed that. They went to a non-contiguous where you're only in the district, so that the district is more like a checkerboard. If you're in the district now, you pay the tax, okay? So they did fix that. It makes it less workable though, because now how do you pay for all that infrastructure? You just, you know, so if there's 5 miles between the one guy that wants to sign up and the next guy, are they gonna run 5 miles of pipeline and you two pay for it? Yeah. So, anyway, it is a viable solution, and it would certainly possibly help people that are already out of water, okay? So we can't say that's not true. It sure won't help the small family farms though. It's not an irrigation district. It's a domestic water district. So we're still gonna see the continued loss in spite of a water district with small farms. And last, and perhaps just as important as anything, it does not address the underlying root cause. In the aerospace industry where I work, we always are fighting, trying to figure out what's the root cause and then a corrective action. There's all kinds of things that happen up here. And you try to fix the symptom and the rocket still blows up. You find out it was something else. You gotta get to the root cause. And the root cause is overpumping. This does not address that, but it can help, okay? INA, that's another solution. Matter of fact, Gail Griffin explained to me that, she tried to pass an INA, a temporary INA for us. We tried to do this in 2015, and they turned it down. She just tried to pass one this year, a 5-year moratorium on increase in drilling and pumping. The problem is, what do you do at the end of the 5 years? There was no built-in requirement to roll into an AMA or a permanent INA, which means we'd all move right back to where we are right now. And going, okay, now what do we do? So you have to have a meeting and try to get consensus all over again. I told her this, you needed to do that 15 years ago, 20 years ago. An INA freezes the expansion, stops the expansion of pumping at current levels, but it includes no tools for reversing the amount of pumping that takes place. It merely guarantees the current pumping level, okay? Everybody understands that. Active management area. Active management area, they've been around, like I said earlier, for a while, AMA, and it is essentially an IMA with some tools built in for reversing pumping, okay? That's the biggest difference. It freezes irrigation pumping at current levels. It involves ADWR experts in the community in developing an area plan, and it does give some tools to help lower. And this is kind of, I read a lot of this statute between our last meeting and now, and it's interesting because one line in the statute says that the director shall promulgate to the legislature any proposed enabling legislation to meet the desires of the board of the AMA. So in the AMA is built the ability for the ADWR to ask the legislature for new laws. And that's gonna play a part in our AMA, it's gonna have to. The current AMA laws are not gonna fix our problem. If we get the AMA, it will act like an INA, okay? But your wells aren't gonna start coming back up. That's just the truth. But there are tools in there that over decades, we can help to go towards safe, what they call safe yield. We have ideas, and we've all got to be talking about those ideas. Steve and I are going to be meeting with the fellow that was gave a good amount of input on our last meeting. He's been a farmer here forever, and another farmer, and we're going to talk about it, and he's going to show us what they actually presented to the legislature back in 2015, that the agriculture community said they could sign up to. And that might be part of the tools that we say, okay, this will be part of our AMA. We've all got to be involved in that process. Okay, I said this last time, and I think tonight it might be more true. I might be the only conservative in this room. I don't want government, but the problem is, I don't want government in my life, but government has always been, and the legitimate place for government has always been about balancing personal rights. And I tell my farmer friend, you do have the right to pump the water under your ground. What I say is you don't have the right to pump the water under my ground. Okay, and that's a change in paradigm, because current law, that is perfectly okay. There's no liability unless you're within a certain distance of somebody pumping. But other than that, it really is survival of the fittest. So, yeah, I want small government, but there is a legitimate place for government in all of our lives. And particularly when you have a question of the balancing of rights. In this case, they call it property rights. They tie our water rights, our groundwater rights into property rights. Well, something's out of balance because 97% of our groundwater is going to irrigation. 1.5% is going to residential, and 1.5% is going to the power company. Is that still correct, Steve?
In the Wilcox Basin.
In the Wilcox Basin.
90% is Douglas.
90% in the Douglas Basin. If you have a city, it gets, overall in the state, I think it's 74% goes to irrigation. It's a great big white elephant in the room. So we have to work with that community to resolve it, or we're not gonna get anywhere. Most immediate option on the table is the AMA. We had somebody in our last meeting, tell us about an AMA and how frightening it was and things, and I thought, you know, I'd rather study it myself and actually show you that it's not quite that frightening. What we're gonna be doing actually, and really thanks to the team that's doing this, it's unbelievable, but it's called a subsequent active management area. AMA will be on the November ballot now. What happens if it passes? Well, according to the statute, the first thing is within 30 days, the director will promulgate a goal for the AMA. And this is where they decide whether it's gonna be planned depletion, or managed depletion, or safe yield. If you read it, it talks about earth fissures, subsidence, loss of capacity, and degradation to the surface. That almost certainly will require that it be deemed a safe yield, but there's no guarantees. Okay?
Mark, explain what safe yield is.
Safe yield is the idea that you reach a level that's sustainable. You don't take more than you put in. That's safe yield. I call it sustainability. It's a different one. So he's got 30 days, and then he has to have, within 30 days after that, he has to have public hearings to make sure that we all agree with his stated goals. So there's a lot of public input. That's what I wanted to put these slides up for. I'm not gonna read all these, but this is the one where it talks about storage capacity and earth fissures, land subsidence, fissures endangering property or potential groundwaters, and then it must include measures for reducing groundwater withdrawals in accordance with these sections of the law. That's what, if everything's, I think, done correctly, that's probably the kind of AMA that we'll end up with. I want to show you this. Within 2 years of this, he has to promulgate a plan for achieving that. And those plans last 10 years, okay? The other AMAs are on their 4th decade now. And I brought with me, because this just published, I brought with me the court order for the Phoenix Active Management Area. And I brought it with me because of this section right here. Shall be adopted only after public hearings pursuant to sections 45, 570, 571. There's a lot of public input in this process. So contrary to what we were hearing last week, this is not Tucson and Phoenix trying to take our water. This is not Maricopa County trying to control our groundwater. We all get to play a part in this plan and the goal, okay? This one right here, this court order says, if no person files a motion for, here it says no person, doesn't qualify who. It just says if no person files a motion for rehearing or review within the time allowed by section 3 of this order shall become final for the purposes of judicial review on April 17th, 2020, and the department shall post notices on its website that the order is final as of that date. If any person files a timely motion for rehearing or review, the director will issue decisions on the motion and may modify the management plan after rehearing the review. So there's multiple ways. You gotta have public hearings to listen to us, and the administrative court has to receive any kind of objection from us if we don't agree with it, and then they will rehear it. Okay. So it's important to know we do have an input in this process, and there is any person may file a motion for rehearing. Hey, there's one more option. Oh, by the way, let me say this, the AMA, and it's not like our legislature's not doing anything. They have proposed things like money for mountain front recharge systems, modified recharge. The problem is they're more kind of, in my opinion, feel-good bills because we got like $2.5 million in low interest rate loans available to anybody who wants to go borrow money at a low interest rate and build a catchment basin up on their land near the mountain. You still have to pay the money back. I said, when you start talking grants, now you're talking, because that's what needs to happen for that to happen. And I don't know anybody that's gonna go, you know, maybe if you're Rob Walton or somebody like that, which they have done that over in actually in San Pedro, the Walton Family Foundation helped to fund the recharge area over there in San Pedro. So, but status quo, we can live with that, but make no mistake, we do have a water regulation already. It's called the law of the jungle, I call it, or survival of the fittest, with those with the deepest pockets and wells already control your water, whether you like it or not. If you don't believe me, wait for your well to go dry and see what your recourse is. You have no recourse, and that's because the deepest pockets and the deepest wells own the water, whether it's under your property or not, on the current water law. So we do have law, and you have no protected right to the water in your land unless there's an AMA. AMA changes that, and AMA changes that and declares that the aquifer is a public property, public asset, and that changes the rules of the game a little bit, okay? Anyway, if we do nothing at all, it is a race to the bottom. You can see that. And you can see that, I want to point this out, that we were on this trajectory in the 70s. Everybody went belly up, and the aquifer actually started to rise. The water level started to rise, and this was at about 115 to 120,000 acre feet.
Yeah, low hundreds, yeah.
You know, low hundreds per year. Right now, we're pumping somewhere around 250 to 300,000 acre feet. So to reach safe yield, we would at least have to pull back to about 50% or more because of the drought. Okay, so it's a big nut to crack. That ain't gonna happen easily, and that's not gonna happen in a short period of time. But that doesn't mean we give up, because this is unacceptable to me at least. Okay, thank you for listening.
Okay, so, thank you, Mark.
I don't want water, I need agua.
Yes. Okay, so, thank you, Mark, and, one thing I just want to clarify, those of you living in the Douglas Basin, an INA was established here, and it was actually, believed in the there was some cooperation and, irrigation control even before the Groundwater Management Act occurred in 1980, and then, and when the act went into place, it exempted all rural areas. So, the only places that really kind of were built into the law to have an AMA initially were primarily Pima County, Pinal County, and Maricopa County. And there were a couple other places that opted in at the beginning, but Douglas Basin and one other basin up north somewhere opted to go with the INA option. Every other rural area in the state opted out completely, including Wilcox Basin. So Douglas Basin, the only reason I mentioned, the Douglas Basin would be in significant worse shape today if they hadn't done that in 1980. But even so, there's so many loopholes within the INA process, and the way it works, and we can talk about it if you have questions, that irrigation has actually increased in the Douglas Basin 45% from approximately 1991 to today, maybe even closer to 50% today. So even with the INA, there's no guarantee that irrigation won't increase. So that's why we're pushing, that's why we didn't talk a lot about the INA as an option, and talk more about the AMA. Okay, so the rest of the meeting, rest of this time tonight, we want to give you the chance to ask questions. Tell us tell us about your water anxiety, your stress, what your story. Ask questions about whether it's the AMA, whether it's about the groundwater situation, the science behind it, and we want to help everybody kind of become more knowledgeable and better informed about this and more engaged. And we ask, with your comments, be respectful. We're all neighbors in this. We're all in this together. We want you to focus on uniting rather than dividing the community, about solution-oriented comments and forward-looking. We really have to, I think, we're not going to solve this by dividing ourselves apart and making it more us versus them. It's it's gonna be us going forward and making this happen together. Just to ask you, if you do have a question, it's a smaller group tonight. We had about 75, 80 people last week, but when you speak, even so, with the smaller group, it's probably best to stand up and project. We're trying to record this meeting as well, so if you speak, if you stand up, it's more likely we're going to be able to hear you on the video. And if anyone can't hear them, raise your hand and we'll have them repeat, or we'll repeat it for them. You know, if you have some information to share, it always helps for people to feel validated by, or that information is validated if they know what your sources are and what led you to your conclusions. So try to provide that background. And the last thing I'll say, if multiple people are standing or raising their hand while you're speaking, just try to keep your comments, you know, be mindful of that, and you know, close your comments out if you've already been speaking for some time. So everybody gets a chance. I think we'll be fine here tonight because we've got a smaller group. So with that, I think we'll open it up. Yeah. At the end, I'm going to talk about some next steps. So we'll finish the discussion. We'll have maybe 2 or 3 minutes of talking about some of the next steps and where we go from here. So, anyone want to start? Any questions, comments? Yeah, I know that you two are new to the valley. Is all this news to you about what's going on, or are you concerned that you moved here now, or you don't want to scare anyone away?
That's why we moved here. We've been studying for a while since we started to hear about the problem, and so it is intense, but we're excited to get involved and partner with you all and figure out how to be solution oriented.
That's good to hear. So, yes.
Is there any way we could use because I've seen these signs, it's called the Whitewater Conservation Area. Is there any way to utilize that as a way of maybe, you know, pumping the brakes on this pumping, you know, groundwater, or is it just completely unrelated, you know?
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm a little bit unsure about that, but I thought that was just kind of the name of the district, what's the INA. That's essential. But Michael, you might, you know?
Yeah, the conservation districts are something set up under the U.S. Department of Interior.
Oh, okay.
And that is primarily BLM down in this area, although there are some other sub-agencies involved. The Whitewater District, the Hereford District, etc., all around the state you have different districts. They are usually, the members of those districts are usually landowners with livestock. The livestock growers are the primary people who push the agendas and set up what those agencies are going to do. And the money that comes down from the government primarily goes to those people. However, they are open by law to everybody who owns property in that district. Now, I have recommended, I've spent some time working on the San Pedro, and over there it's primarily the Hereford District. And I have talked people into, sometimes against their will, but they went along with it, joining the district and becoming part of that process so that there are voices there besides the cattle people. And I recommend the same thing here. Obviously, this something was not mentioned here, but we might as well mention it. One of the other big crops besides corn in this valley is alfalfa. Alfalfa is one of the heaviest water-using crops that you can grow. Why do they grow it? They grow it so they can grow cows, right? Just like the dairy, they're growing it for cows. So the people who run the districts are mostly cattle people. They need input from those people in the valley who are not cattle people. And they do have clout. They really do have clout. So if they get involved, I mean, you may have noticed there was I just looked at one of the Whitewater District newsletters recently, and one of the people they were interviewing in there was Peggy Davis, who the Davises, of course, are one of the big pioneering families in the valley. They are cattle growers and alfalfa growers and other kinds of grass growers for the cattle. And she was just talking in her interview about how wonderful Gail Griffin is. And of course, those of you who, like me, have been here for a while fighting about this issue, don't have a lot of good stuff to say about Gail in that regard. But Peggy does.
Good question. Go ahead.
I got a question for Laura, I guess, did something change around you when your well began to go dry, or how deep did your well?
Our well was, drilled in 1923, and it is, roughly 300 feet. It's a homestead. My family got here, in 1900. And, we helped run this water district here in Elfrida, the Elfrida Water Company. My uncle ran it for years, we helped. My resume is, I got 18 and a half years of experience running water and wastewater on Fort Huachuca, where we pump 8 million gallons of water a day. And then in the early 2000s, the government came in because the state said, you're going to be responsible for every person that the fort draws in. And so we cut our water consumption from 8 million gallons a day down to 3 million gallons a day. At that time, which somewhere in my box of history, they were currently, the drawdown for Kansas settlement was 15 feet a year on the primary wells there. That was in 2000.
Yeah, there was a well that I've heard that went down 100 feet in a year.
Yes, yeah, and it, being and working with the fort, I had, the availability of a lot of the statistics that come for this entire state and the watersheds. And, I can tell you, there was a lot of water usage in the 70s, but 99% of that water was recycled also with pump backs.
Yeah, there was a lot more
A lot more drainage ditches ran, and therefore it was recharging. Everywhere the water touches, it recharges, okay? No matter how you state it, what these guys are trying to do, I'm buying it, because, like I said, I've been here. My mom was the first homecoming queen of Valley Union High School. Okay? That's how long we've been here. Okay? And I've seen this valley change so much. And, I've been in politics. I was a crazy guy that got kicked off at the mayor, went out, became mayor of Cochise City. And I served my sentence for 4 years to the best of my ability. Because, like you said, if 51% of the people said yes, I said yes. If 51% said no, then I said no. Because I was this crazy ass little country boy that said, you know, politics, you're supposed to vote for what the public wants. Not, well, I had to vote my conscience. No. I've known Gail for a lot of years. I've been on her good side, I've been on her bad side. For here, these communities in 100 years will be gone. My family, I told this young lady right here, my family moved from Sagebrush, Arizona in 1842. They went to Colonial Juarez, Mexico, as a Mormon colony went down. Okay? That town that is called Sagebrush, y'all know it. Most of you have probably been there. It's called Sholo now.
Yeah.
Cool.
And we've been in this country, you know? My dad came from Texas, he met my mom and never went back to Texas. I love this, this is our place, and believe it or not, even with the water problems that I have right now with my well being drive, it is cheaper for me to haul water than it is to drill a well. And it's actually cheaper for me to have a garden here in Arizona, Elfrida, Arizona, than it is at my own home in Wichita City, where I lived for the last 23 years. Because the price per 1,000 gallons is cheaper here than it is there. It wasn't that way when I was mayor, I can tell you that.
I bring up a good point.
This, we have to start. If you want your children, if you love this community, if you love the idea of communities like this, then we have to get involved. That's all there is
You're hired.
to it. Don't say that, cause I'm one of these guys that.
It's done its time.
Oh, that's right, you served your sentence.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm smarter now because every time they ask me to run for mayor again, I tell them I'm moving to Montana.
Along with everyone else.
That's right.
You know, one
Thank
of the,
you.
one of
Thank
the, I really appreciate your comments and the history, because it's important that there are people in this community that have deep, deep roots like yourself. I talked to a woman who grew up here in the 1930s. Her grandfather came here in the early 1900s, and she's 84 years old now.
Yeah.
And she talked about her father being a rancher over near Kansas, Cochise Stronghold Road area, and that he was one of the first to get a turbine pump.
Yeah.
And how he taught her as a young child, you know, the farmers and the ranchers then understood the value of water, because they lived with very simple water, means of getting water out of the ground, you know, windmill or that. She said, I grew up, every drop of water, my father said, never waste any water. And that was the ethic. And, you know, when talking to her, it was clear in her head, in her mind, she realized that the character of this valley is changing dramatically with the influx of these large, some cases corporate farming, industrial farming, the big dairies, but even the orchards. Mark mentioned this 80-acre orchard. 80 acres is not that big an orchard when you look at, number, but these guys from California, we never see him, he's not our neighbor.
Well,
I mean, he has an orchard that's our neighbor, we don't even know who he is.
and one entity now owns 66% of the irrigatable ground in the valley.
River.
One entity. And you don't think that's changing the face of our community?
So that has to scare folks like you. I know it scared her, and her well had gone dry. She had to sell a family heirloom that she wanted to pass on to her grandson. And she made a trade with the well driller and said, will you take this to drill in my well? Because I grew up here, I want to die here. I don't want to leave this house and this property because there's no water. He said, okay. He probably wasn't worth what he put into it, but, and so she found out a few months later that he sold that to someone else. My grandson, she was all upset. My grandson came to her and said, Grandma, this is what told me. I was almost in tears listening to her. She said, Grandma, I'm gonna find that, I'm gonna get it back for you, before you die. It's like, this is the way it's changing, like people, we need to hear from folks like you.
My family's genealogy, my grandmother wrote when she was a girl that you couldn't see the horses, all you could see was the riders, because the grass was so tall. And she said, here, our little whitewater wash, and this is documented, through our family's genealogy. They would go there to go fishing. They would catch trout there in the whitewater creek wash, Rucker came through, and before the county diverted all the water, Rucker always came right through the middle of Elfrida. My parents owned property there, and we were always flooded out.
You tell you, it ain't, cause it wasn't renamed Turkey Creek and it was Rucker.
Yeah.
Until, well, I forget, but, no, it's called Cave Creek originally,
Yeah.
before Rucker died there.
Yeah.
Colonel Rucker, when
Yeah.
when he died, when they renamed it, Rucker Canyon.
Kansas settlement, was, there were stories about the grass being waist high, or higher. And, when it came, but the interesting thing is most of the farming that started in Kansas settlement, my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, in the history I've read, most of that started in the late, like 1918 to 1925.
Well, they didn't have power.
They didn't
I
have.
realize.
Right,
My grandfather was the first meter reader for Sulphur Springs Valley,
Wow.
you know, and his whole district was from Douglas to here. We have it, we have family pictures of them lighting up the power for McNeil and Elfrida.
Yeah.
You know?
But apparently those years, we had like about 15 years of very high rainfall, within the 20-inch or so range. And so the grass was growing crazy and, anyway. But appreciate your comments, and it is very important that we connect with that history and help people to see how it's changing, how maybe with some of this work we can change that.
You and I can go see you all together.
Anyone, any other discussion? Yes?
I just had a question, and thank you for sharing. You mentioned that in the seventies, there was a lot of active recycling of the water. Does the AMA address how to recycle the used water?
There's portions of the AMA that require, as part of the plan, for the director to develop ways of addressing, either by recharge, you know, in Phoenix and Pinal County, Maricopa County, Mapima, they've got the Central Arizona Canal. They're taking water from the Colorado, which is, you know, worse problem than we do, to recharge their aquifer, to try to reach, safe yield. So included in it is the ability of the director to promulgate plans on how building, mountain front recharge areas and incentivizing efficiencies in farming and things like that. So there is a framework. I mean, that's the best way to put it, is there's a framework in that.
There's no definite plans about how that would happen yet, but we have some ideas about how it could happen.
I have a question for one of you guys. The old Ponderosa farm up there is nothing but pecans now. We've got new pivots coming in all over this valley. And, when I was a young man, they had a water, an irrigation district. And because Stump's Dodge used to, pay people to come out here and plow the fields here just out of McNeil, the vacant fields there. They had to do that once every 10 years to keep their water rights. See? And now I see farms where there's never been a farm in my life. And
There's no limit in
No.
place at present.
Well,
and now
there is.
they're putting in pivots. And one of the explanations I got was that, you know, back in the 70s, when you farmed in a straight road. Now it's a pivot. Well, now you've got 4 corners that aren't being watered. So they're saying that we're gonna take the water rights off of those 4 corners and we're gonna use them on brand new land.
That's exactly what they do in.
That's right.
That's one of the loopholes in
In
our.
that's
What they're doing.
And that's what's really killing us.
You got 40 acres
That's
in
what I
corners,
see.
you got 40
Yes.
acres, so if you have 4 circles, you could open another circle. Yes. And that's why people say it's INA. Not only that, they sunk wells, just like they did here when we started in 2015, talking about this, like 14, 13. Oh my gosh, the well drilling rigs all of a sudden in this area, we started drilling wells like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Because the freeze will be at the level that you establish. I think for the AMA, it's gonna be 2 out of the last 5 years. So everybody raced to get under the INA, and, yeah, we're still doing that now.
Well, 22 years ago, Foster Pump charged my mom and dad, $5,000 to put a 3/4 horse, well down. and, it lasted until they dried it up.
Hmm.
You know, but it's crazy.
There it is, what's this?
I just
Hey,
have-
hold it, oh, it's on.
Yeah.
You know where the lights are, can we get one set of light, I don't want to go on them all, it'll drown out the screen.
The lady door.
So Mary Ann should correct anything that we're saying that's incorrect. She probably knows more about it than any of us.
There it is.
The other one's on.
That's too bright?
Back one's on.
Maybe the back one, there we go, that's
I
good.
saw
Thanks.
Mary Ann does have the petition if anyone hasn't signed it, and so we
And
just
that
other
petition.
people here.
If you live in Douglas
AMA,
Basin.
In the Douglas Basin, so we can get that on the ballot, and then you can decide, like you were saying, half on it, 57%, let's do it. But I had a question for you guys, which was, I'm under the impression that instead of growing like 1 or 2 seasons a year, crops a year, it's gotten to be like 3 or 4, so that, it's just growing all year round.
The biggest grower is growing 2 crops a year. They're growing corn, followed by, and they're, they give numbers, but, it's not a secret. You go to that page, that 208-page report from the ADWR, you can look up what it takes to grow a crop of alfalfa, a crop of beans, a crop of corn, a crop of wheat. It's all there, and then you can calculate, how many acre feet they're using for the number of acres that they're using.
Yeah, the other, I think, Michael, I'll let you.
But not more than 2.
Yeah, a follow-up.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on
Yeah,
that.
go ahead, Mike.
One of the big changes that's happened since I've been here for 50 years. One of the big changes I've seen is that they used to grow like what we would have thought was normal farming areas. They would farm while the weather was nice and the rain was falling. The rain stopped falling, back in the late 90s. And then they started pumping. Now they pump year round. The alfalfa farm, I call it an alfalfa factory, down the road from me, which I've been listening to for the past week, with constant day and night pumping, now runs all year. They used to have 3 or 4 cuttings of alfalfa a year. Now they have at least 6 on that place. One of my neighbors told me that the alfalfa farm over on Central that he's connected with is cutting at least 10 times a year now. Every few weeks, they cut the alfalfa again. And they pump all year. Same thing is going on now because of the drought in the orchards. One of my neighbors raises pecans. He irrigates all year long. It's not the way it used to be.
Even when it's raining.
Yeah.
They don't stop when it rains. Just give you a perspective, the gentleman mentioned, what's the city? Oh, Fort West, he was using 8 million down to 3 million.
Yep.
Um,
They're even less than that now.
a typical pivot is pumping anywhere from 750 to 1,000 gallons per minute, every day, at least 9 months a year. So that's, each pivot at 750 gallons a minute is 1,080,000 gallons. So 3 pivots could supply the whole city of Fort Huachuca with its water. And the one large entity here in the valley could supply the city of Tucson with its domestic water needs. So that's a kind of imbalance we're talking about. And it's not a small deal, and it's not easy to reverse.
I just want to say one quick follow-up, and then Karen, you next, and then Craig. Just to follow up on your question, Mary Ann, and answer it further. Clearly, there has been an increase in irrigation in both the Douglas Basin and the Wilcox Basin. The Wilcox Basin is probably close, documented through 2018, 83% increase from about 2000. So we went from about 100,000 acre feet a year in the Wilcox Basin. In the 2018 report, it was about 220,000. Okay, so, and now we're probably close to 250,000. So that growth rate is just accelerated. The Douglas Basin, even though they're in an INA, they have increased over close to 50%. Okay, and the data there is not as good right now, or not as up to date, but it goes up to about 2014, and from 1991 to 2014, it went up 45 to 50%. And they, So regardless of where you look, you know, whatever they're doing, whether it's multiple cuttings like Mike was saying, or fields that did go fallow, in the winter, are now, you know, being grown year round, there's definitely, the demand for water is dramatically increased. And it's not because more people are living here, actually the population here has dropped in that time, in those time frames, in terms of actual number of people. The increase is all agriculture. In fact, in the Douglas Basin, municipal water use went down in that period. I think, you know, it's probably somewhat, what's your name?
Byron Roberts.
Byron. What Byron had said, you know, with watching the city, Douglas probably cut their water use down because Douglas is the biggest municipal user of water in this basin. So, Karen, and then we'll go back over here. Karen, go ahead.
Could you talk a little bit about the Groundwater Stewards, pledge? I mean, what, you know, getting the community involved and how we can move forward as a, I don't wanna say political action, but how we can, you know, create change in the county, in thought.
Yeah, okay, good. Yes, one of the Cochise Groundwater Stewards, there's a group of us that formed this group called the Cochise Groundwater Stewards. And one of the primary efforts of the group is to get people aware of, make more people more aware of what's going on with groundwater. So we have this situation. And to get them to commit, build a level of inform them to a level where they understand the issues and willing to commit to sign a pledge, as Karen alluded to. We call it the Sustainable Water Policy Pledge. That you will pledge to support a sustainable water policy for Cochise County. So that is something that we encourage all of you that are here tonight to sign that if you haven't already, along with the AMA petition. There's no conflict between the two. The AMA petition is a legal petition, will be on the ballot and form this legal entity. This is more of a personal, getting people engaged and starting to, we want to create that network of people that are organized together to, in a divided front, to show our political leaders, our community leaders, that we as the people who live here are very committed to this and want to see that sustainable water policy. So, yes, thank you, Ken. Anyone else want to add anything to that?
I'd like to say one thing.
Well, hold on, is it a Brian question or? Okay, I'm gonna go here and then we'll come back to Brian unless there's someone else before Brian. All right, go ahead.
Just a couple of questions.
Right.
When the AMA comes into play, what will happen with the IMA that exists now for the Douglas Basin?
It will supersede it, as I understand it.
Okay,
An AMA is, as soon as the AMA is declared, the IMA goes away.
okay.
But the AMA, as soon as the AMA is, and I believe it basically happens on November, if the election is successful on November 8th, as soon as the election is certified, the AMA comes into effect, the INA goes away. One of the first things the AMA does, in terms of changing anything, is puts a freeze on any new, it continues, makes basically permanent.
And that actually occurs as soon as the petitions are filed and
Once,
certified.
once the election is called, which will be.
When it's called, I mean, so that'll be August.
Once it's called, they'll freeze any further irrigable acres. You can't irrigate any more acres until, it's voted
Till
on,
the vote
and then they,
And then that becomes permanent essentially on whenever the election is certified, the election results certified, if we
Yeah.
get 51% of the vote, 50 plus one.
And then secondly, as we were driving into the meeting tonight, it's 5:03 PM. And I see these big farms still irrigating. And in my brain, I'm thinking, why, in the hottest part of the day, are groups watering, wasting that water, evaporating into the air? And it speaks to the conservation part, or the rules, I guess, that the AMA will come up with, and as far as conservation for preserving that water, right? Is that how that works?
It takes a full 24 hours minimum for that pivot, that arm to go around the circle, so they have to irrigate 24 hours a day, but what they're doing, you know, I've toured the dairy, the big white elephant in the room, and I gotta tell you, if it can be done right, they are doing it right. They are super efficient, it's an amazing operation. Problem is you can't grow 120,000 cows in the desert without milking the dry. But, you know, they drop their sprinklers down, sometimes they even drag them on the ground now to try to reduce the evaporation. So there's things that they're doing. Trust me, they are trying. Most farmers in the valley are trying to do it right. It's not like they're the evil empire, but there's only so much they can do, and efficiency doesn't equate with sustainability.
Thank you.
So I wanted to say something, you know, we can all do our part, right, to join and say, okay, we're gonna support this. Just so you know, the grasses you were talking about, you can go and buy native grasses. If you go to the Ace Hardware and you ask them for native grasses, it's like $30 for a pound. So I'm planting mine when the monsoon comes. But some of those grasses are like 3, 4, 5 feet tall, just like you said. So I think by planting native grasses instead of mowable grass, when you plant those, then what it does is it does what grasses do. It busts up the soil to allow the water to get down into the aquifer. And I think if we all Johnny Appleseed it, and can plant some grass, you know, just anything that'll grow to bust up the soil will make a difference. And, you know, the people that are doing the best they can, as you say, I know they're killing everything around the exterior of these farms. So rather than be against them, perhaps we need to find some way to talk to them, to educate them, to say, look, you know, don't kill everything that's not alfalfa. Let that grow, right?
What's interesting is this federal program, so I owned a farm, I owned a 550 acre farm for about 6 or 7 years, right at the corner of Birch Road and Highway 191. I bought it to develop a residential air park, okay, and I got stuck farming, and I learned a lot, but you know what, I could make 70 grand a year just planting the corners with what the federal government told me to plant. So it's a really complex farming, you know. The second biggest spending bill in the country next to the defense bill is the farm bill. It's you know, I'm sorry, I'm gonna piss everybody off here, but the defense bill is the Republicans' favorite spending bill, and the farm bill is the Democrats' favorite spending bill. So they both spend money like drunken sailors, just on different things. And the money that goes into farming and for just to grow or don't grow. It's crazy. There's so many things for these farmers that motivates and demotivates the ag community from doing sometimes the right thing, like you're talking about. Do the right thing. But there's federal programs that get in the middle of it and cause them sometimes to do the wrong thing.
One thing when I got to see on the little YouTube channel, one of our supervisors say that she sent her questions to the dairy and they said it was, her responses to them were okay.
Yeah, I saw that video. I did, yes.
Here's the deal, that pump that's running 24/7, 365, okay, it's on electricity.
Yep.
Okay, now it's being taxed.
Yes.
That's where our politicians fall in.
Right.
I know, I was one. I wasn't their kind of politician, I was our kind of politician.
There's money involved somewhere.
And there's always that backdoor money coming in, okay? And for them to sit and say that they don't have a say, our supervisors and our politicians, they do have a say. Because what they want their representatives, so that they can get reelected, they want their farmers happy. How we sustain this is your vote, and your vote. Because guess what? The guy in California that owns it doesn't have a vote.
There's 100 of us for every one of them.
That's right.
And what we have to do, and what I'm going to start helping with, is convincing folks in our districts to vote. Because, you know, my son told me, and like it broke my heart, he said, "Dad, I don't give a blank because it ain't gonna matter anyway." And he didn't vote. And I said, "Son, you don't know how many people that have fought and died, men, women, children, everywhere, to give you that right. How many people have fought and died to have that right? And then you to blatantly walk away from it? That was the worst day of my life. Because I felt like I failed my son. Well, if we don't spread the word, we're failing our grandkids, we're failing our great-grandkids, because we're not gonna have these little suburbs. I've seen it, I've sat in those meetings in Phoenix with the great state of Maricopa. That's what they call it. Okay? I'll tell you that. Bob Walkup was the mayor of Tucson. And he said, "Come on, let's go in and see what the great state of Maricopa has to say today."
Yep.
And that's what's happening. When these dairy farmers, and they say that they've got $150 million in reserve to go buy, to drill. All right, I grew up with Brian Allen. He's one of the drillers. He's going down 1,800 to 2,000 feet right now. You want a well dug on your property? You better come up with $100,000, because that's what he wants to talk to you.
And get in line.
Oh, and by the way, make sure you give him the deposit. Because your name just disappears if that deposit ain't on the book.
Well said.
And
We have another gentleman here.
Yes, David, you want to speak?
I was just gonna, I was just gonna say again that, you know, it's beautiful to hear all the passion, surrounded by waters. I had a question about the AMA and, how long that takes, about 2 years before we actually see actual.
Within
action.
30 days, they have to promulgate the goal
You
of
start
AMA.
the process.
Yeah, and then
so
within 2 years, they have to have the plan
established,
established.
and that's really.
In the meantime,
years,
there's a
we're
more-
looking at 2025,
Yeah.
January. So, the beautiful thing, we have to start that now.
Yep.
Thank you. And thank you for starting it before and getting that ball rolling. I heard about really what we also need to do, and you're talking about planting the grasses and all of that, restorative agriculture. We're talking that, Elfrida is doing some of this, they're dropping their pivot arms down, you can put centers on all of them. I worked at a hemp farm in Colorado, and we're the only restorative hemp farm in the country, and again, what I am seeing is a lot of, you know, the pivot systems with the corners, we always cover crop that, we always do cover crop. Pistachio orchards are bare in the trees, which is creating erosion, creating dust. We need to create some, what I'm seeing is we need to create some educational opportunities, work with the farmers to get grants, to get this money from the Farm Bill to put in these practices of cover crops. That are going to increase the yields anyways, because it's going to drop the water usage by putting in alfalfa, alfalfa is amazing, and it takes a lot of water, but in the short term, it throws a 30-foot deep tap. So it breaks up compaction, which is gonna keep water from percolating into the ground. And so by using this in alternate, doing alternative crops, we can get the water to recharge more. Finding grant money, I would love to take a loan for $2 million to do restorative agricultural, or restorative recharge systems on my property. I couldn't do that. So we bought a backhoe, and our well has come up, just in the small earthworks we've done on our property. And getting educational systems, doing these types of water talks about this, but also some educational ones of what we all can do today, because today is, we need to start today. You know, this is 2 years from now, and it should go through. The water district might be the thing that you need for your water tomorrow, let's push that too. But let's stack these systems, let's get education out there. Thank you for wanting to talk to the community and get your momentum moving, that's what we need to do. But how can we get these educational systems, how can we get these grants available? That's not my thing, I don't know how to write grants, but I know technology, I know systems, and I know how to do it.
I think part of that's gonna be sitting down with the agricultural community. Steve and I are gonna start to meet with them now. We're gonna meet with your fellow, next Monday or Tuesday, Steve, and see what he actually proposed back in 2015 to Bill Griffin. And, my neighbor who just texted me, I gotta read this. Can we lighten up for just a minute? I gotta read what he said to me. I love this guy. He's growing cactus, okay? He just says to me, because he tried to call me up on my phone, he says, "This is a robocall. Quit watering your cottonwoods, you water thief." No wonder my farm wells are short. But he just told me there's 2 grant programs coming out right now for farmers. One is for 5 million to like 15 million to help them plant water savvy crops. He says, that's way over my head. I couldn't use all the money if they gave it to me. He says, but there's another one to follow, which starts at 200,000 to 5 million. So we need to learn from the farmers themselves, because farming is, I'm telling you, it's as much government as it is botany and water management, and it's a big nut to crack. But hopefully, you know, they can help us understand the Department of Ag and the program, and hopefully our AMA rules and plan will help tell them, encourage them to do this, look into, you know, things like that. So thanks for your input, really, we have to get there.
I can have a follow-up.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. I mentioned before USDI and your local conservation districts. There are several grant programs within USDI, not just BLM, but a couple of other agencies. I won't try to remember all of
That's
the
the Department of
acronyms.
Interior.
But again, if people get involved in the Whitewater district, they can find out about those grants. And they are available to do things like make, crops, or not crops, you don't have to think of it as crops, but you can make, grow stuff on the rangelands that will help redevelop those rangelands, or regenerate the natural grasslands and natural plant growth, vegetation systems, and so forth. There are grants to do that, and some of them, although I couldn't get one a few years ago because they changed the program in the middle of the year, supposedly it will come back for smallholders, not just your big guys, but the smallholders can get grants to take care of their 10 acres, their 40 acres and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's WIFA grants, I can't remember what it stands for right now, but it's WIFA.
Can you speak up, Marianne?
WIFA grants
All right.
are for restorations, like on-site restorations, and those are small
Isn't
scale.
there some grants for the water harvesting as well?
No.
I thought there were.
WIFA? WIFA.
I don't know if I was gonna mention this a little earlier, I don't know if you know, there's a gentleman that lives up Turkey Creek, and he received $300,000 to do rock stack check dams all the way up Turkey Creek.
Nice.
They increased, Denny's Migratory Worth is paying them most of that money to do it, over, I think, a 10-year span. They put in 5,000 handmade check dams going on. I forgot what, draw that was, I didn't get the chance to look at the book. But he's a wealth of knowledge in the area, and it can be done if, you know, capturing water high, allows it to percolate and recharge.
Yep, we've gotta do that, all of the above.
One thing to mention about the recharge, at least for the Wilcox Basin, everything in the Wilcox Basin, whether it's underground or surface, ultimately flows towards the playa. And, you know, you'll see water, you know, a thin layer, a shallow layer of water on the playa after, you know, heavy monsoons or heavy winter rains. And it's my understanding, most of that water evaporates. So that's water that we could recharge. So when we talk about safe yield under the AMA, you know, that's a combination of all the things we can do to enhance recharge, which would be, you know, maybe having some kind of dry wells that allow water to get down before they get to the playa, some of these check dams, all that, anything that enhances that mountain front recharge, because that's where 90-some% of all the recharge now occurs. And the vast majority of it occurs off the Chiricahuas and the Pinalenos, because they're so much taller. But this is where the drought's killing us right now, because the biggest impact of the drought is not so much the summer monsoon, even though we had the year before last, we had a pretty dry month, a non-soon, whatever you want to call it. It's the winter snows. And I know, you know, just in the last 5 years, particularly, you know, the amount of snow you see on the Chiricahuas is so much thinner and so much rarer, the same with the, and some of that's the temperature's increasing as well as precipitation going down, so. But recharge is a big part of it, and any grants we can get to make that happen. The other thing, yeah, we're gonna wrap up. Other thing, we had one, I saw one more hand, I wanna make sure someone else put their hand up. Yes.
I've only been here 20 years, 21 years, and I live south of Warren in Bisbee.
Okay.
And several years ago, a helicopter, I guess, went over with a great big round thing checking the water, and realized that, and said that we don't have an aquifer under where I am, but we have crevice water. So of course, I worry about running out of water all the time, and I'm really careful. And what might happen even in the Bisbee area, and I worry about all of Arizona now that I'm here and claimed it. I'm from Maryland, and we had droughts there too, but not like here, obviously. And so I'm worried about the future. I have a little air park. I rent airplane hangars, and because my late husband wanted to do that, so I came and built airplane hangars for it. And my house is there. So I worry about all of this, and I worry about the waste people do with water, how they waste their water. Right now, my well pump is broken, so we're working on that. And I have some water hauled, so I'm really careful. Flush the toilet twice a day, I live by myself. Flush the toilet twice a day, save the dishes up to do them all at once, use the same water, do that stuff. And my mantra has been, if it doesn't live in the desert, it's not, you know, if you can't eat it, then you don't water it. If it doesn't grow in my yard, and my yard's very colorful, I have trees that are 25 feet tall. I don't know how they got so tall, but in 20 years, but I worry about it. So when is the rest of, you know, like over there going to pollute water too? We have to worry about it all, but we have to educate people.
You know, I think there should be this is just my personal, there should be, anyone that wants to move here needs to check off and sign that they understand how precious water is and all the things they need to do when they move here that they maybe didn't do.
Stop building a swimming pool.
People come here, I've had multiple people come in from out of state, because this issue, we're at like the epicenter of the water scarcity issues in this country. And the people that I've talked to who come here, they're just like amazed that we live in a desert. We get 13 inches of rain average in this valley. The parts of Arizona get, you know, as little as 4 inches, 7 inches, and Phoenix. Bottom line is, we can't sustain our current standard of living when it comes to water use in a desert environment. And that's a fact that none of our politicians want to admit. And a lot of people who live here don't want to admit. And my father was a hydrologist. Bless his soul, he passed away when I was 18. But in the 60s, he was lecturing us in the 60s about how ridiculous water use was going on here in the desert. We had probably a fourth of the people living here than we do now. And people, you know, it's common sense. You live in the desert. Just like that woman I told you, the family heirloom she had to sell. It just breaks your heart to see what's happening here, because she grew up when water was scarce, and we pay so little for water. I can't remember what, Byron, was you talking about the price of water? I I was just reading about how much they pay for water, like in Israel. Read up on what Israel has done with the water situation. That's a country that gets less rain than us, they have very little fresh water supply, and they have gone from almost being, almost become totally sustainable with a free population and a thriving economy. But they've gotten smart. Almost 99% of the agriculture there is micro drip irrigation, not just the simple drip we put around these are like computerized drip systems that monitor everything, monitor the soil content, and only water as much in the root zone. So it can be done, we just don't have the will to do it. And if you wanna keep living here, people are gonna say, hey, we gotta pay the price and sacrifice. I know one of our comments were one of our people at last meeting, right? The point, we're all gonna have to sacrifice. We wanna live here.
To point out, Steve, that the politicians that I've talked to, Gail and David, and that every one of them mentioned Israel and what they're doing in Israel. You know, they have bought into the idea that technology is gonna help get us out of this mess. You know, pipelines from the Mississippi, irrigating,
Desalination.
but they've all brought up Israel, and I said, hey, do you know the Appleton engineers living right here in Sunset, retired, that helped Israel do that? Come talk to them. Yeah.
I just wanted to say real quick that the Arizona Land and Water Trust does give monies to farms if they put them in trust for conservation. So in doing that, you get some money to keep your farm going, and then it becomes part of the conservation trust, and it has to stay that way for perpetuity. But it's a good one.
Yeah, and that's the only way to really probably get some of these grandfather irrigation that's,
There's one right next to the Sulphur
surrendered or
Springs.
retired, yeah.
Yeah, the Sulphur Springs.
Well, that's what a lot of the ranchers,
Yeah.
they're all going to the conservation, and that way they get to utilize the land, they can get the grants, and then they don't have to pay taxes on it.
Yeah, we have to give them incentives. I mean, they're fearful, they're very afraid of what can happen to their livelihood, and that's their livelihood, so, you know, we need to be cognizant of that and work out a solution that helps them adapt and doesn't, you know, their whole income goes away. Okay. Yeah, last comment.
You guys were talking about Israel, but have you ever heard of the Cochise Foundation in India? Where the community, instead of waiting for the government, the community came together and solved their own water crisis. Or they were a town of farmers, and they had to leave and go to the city to find work because they could no longer sustain their farms. But in the course of 45 days, these communities came together, they dug swales, they waited for the rain came and refilled 500 and something wells.
How do you spell it?
Pani, P-A-N-N-I, I believe. And in 1 year, they solved their water crisis. And I know, just like the gentleman was saying, that this is gonna take time, but what can we, as a community, do in the meantime to recharge our aquifers? Because you were saying that the more we're coming out, the more we're seeking. So if we don't stop that and start to recharge now, we're not gonna have that.
That's immediate, clear, blood present
Right.
issue.
And
So the backhoe,
yeah,
that's
and
where it starts.
Yeah,
Exactly.
dig a hole.
The crops, cover
Dig a
crops.
hole.
Dig
Dig a hole.
exactly,
Well,
because,
make sure you get state regulations, because you can't
Right.
stop a stream.
right.
Right,
But
oh, yeah.
it says, you just to base on the numbers, 1 inch of water on 1 acre of land, you collect over 27,000 gallons. So just imagine what we can do as a community, if we just started to fix the soil so that it can percolate down into the groundwater and start actually harvesting. You say we only get 13 gallons, 13 inches if it's a year, but 13 inches a year is still millions of gallons of water. And per acre, and we can do it. We can go with the government, but we also do it ourselves together.
Remember this though, sometimes we get that 13 inches in 1 day.
That's the
That,
challenge.
but realize, because the state measures that and says, okay, they met their quota, you know what I mean? Well, 12.5 inches of that ran off to Mexico. Because we can't stop the stream, we can't stop, Rucker Restoration Project, you know? It was a small canyon lake, but it's a reservoir. And that helped with our groundwater. When we had the fire, you know, you're talking about the snow, not seeing that. Well, the fires that we had on the mountain, it brings everything down, and we get all the runoff, all the soot, and all of that, and if you've noticed in the last 15 years, the creek at Rucker is demolishing the campsites that were there. That,
From the fire.
yeah, you know, and so, these are things that you have to prepare for also, is to understand that, yeah, we do get 13 inches, but we may not keep that 13 inches. And that's one of the questions I always ask, is, City of Tombstone gets their water 90% from the Huachuca Mountains, okay? It's piped to them. And, you know, you sit here and you go, okay, how much State of Arizona, Environmental Quality, all of the American Water Works, whole association, how much of that is actually going back into our pocket? You know, because that was one thing I dealt with before Huachuca was, Tombstone would take 2 million gallons a day away from our watershed. So we had to bring that water back to us, and it was basically giving it away for free. And so those are great ideas, and exactly what we need to do in the places we can do it.
Yeah, I think that's what you're saying is on a micro level, in my backyard, I could dig a pit tomorrow. You know, I could do something tomorrow, I could swim and stuff, I mean, capture and not let it run to play, because it runs off my property to play. Okay, so,
Well, thank you, everyone. Let me, give you a few, ideas about next steps here. You know, there's a lot more information on, we have a website, it's cochisewaterfuture.org. So we encourage you to keep learning and sharing what you learned today and what you learned on our website or any other sources. There's a lot of good other sources we refer you to on that website. Share that information with your neighbors and with your families and friends. Help everybody get more informed about what they can do. We'll keep putting more, we're building out the website, we'll be putting more information on there about individual actions you can do as well, because it's important everybody get involved. Let our political leaders know, if you're passionate about this, let them know how they're concerned about the groundwater. 2 years ago, we had the election. I don't remember any of our state politicians talking about water in the campaign. Let's make sure they talk about it this year. I'm not sure we're gonna change their minds, but if they know we're talking about it and concerned, they're gonna start thinking, hey, maybe I should go with the 51.
It's your
I
vote.
know it's more than 51 on this issue.
It's your vote. In small communities, it's the vote.
Yeah, it's huge, yes. We get involved, become part of our, CGS, our Coaches Groundwater Stewards Working Group. Sign up on our contact list to stay informed and learn about new opportunities. We're gonna take, what's on the contact list, we'll follow up if you give us permission, by signing the list. We will contact you about signing the pledge if you haven't done that yet, and do that in the next few months. The pledge for sustainable groundwater. And then lastly, if you agree that doing nothing is really not an option, we really strongly encourage you to consider supporting the AMA petition for the Douglas Basin, which is still being signed, and for the Wilcox Basin, the petitions that have already been submitted, and it should be on the ballot in November, so voting for the AMA as a start. But obviously, like we said, there's a lot more that each of us can do in the meantime, so we appreciate all you coming here tonight, thank you. This is the start, and we look forward to working